The reading of Dad's will was exactly the kind of tense, airless affair I'd always dreaded, a moment suspended in time that felt heavy with unspoken resentments. There we sat, my older brother, Mark, his perpetually unimpressed wife, Carol, and me, dust motes dancing in the single shaft of sunlight that pierced the lawyer's overly formal office. The mahogany desk was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the strained silence that had become a hallmark of our family gatherings. Dad had always been a man of few words, a stoic farmer who communicated more through actions than speech, and apparently that practicality extended to his final wishes. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, droned on, his voice a monotonous hum against the backdrop of our internal turmoil, a legalistic lullaby that did little to soothe our nerves. Then came the division of assets, the moment we had all been bracing for. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the document with an air of clinical detachment. Mark's name was called first, a familiar pattern of favoritism that had defined our lives. He was bequeathed the house, the sprawling two-story farmhouse that held so many memories, both good and bad, a symbol of our family's history and his supposed birthright. Carol's lips quirked into a barely perceptible smile, a flicker of triumph that sent a jolt of bitter resentment through me. She had always seen the house as her prize, the tangible proof of her family's ascent. And me, I got the pasture. The 80 acres of windswept grassland that had always seemed like more trouble than it was worth, a vast expanse of dry grass and stubbornly rooted weeds. A wave of profound disappointment washed over me, a bitter resignation that felt all too familiar. It figured. Mark had always been the favored son, the one who inherited the family name, the more valuable property, and Dad's seemingly endless approval. I was left with the afterthought, the land that no one wanted to work, the property everyone assumed would eventually be sold for a pittance. As Mr. Thompson wrapped up the reading, he mentioned something in a low voice about mineral rights attached to the pasture, a clause Dad had added years ago, almost as an afterthought. It was a throwaway line, a mere footnote in a long and detailed document. Mark scoffed, dismissing it with a wave of his hand and a condescending chuckle. "Probably just some old clause," he'd said, his eyes already fixed on the imagined comforts and future renovations of the house. Little did he know that one seemingly insignificant detail would become the cornerstone of my future and the undoing of his complacent victory. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for the next chapter of this family saga. The day I took possession of the pasture, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the threat of rain, a fitting backdrop for the storm brewing within me. The land stretched out before me, a seemingly endless expanse of dry grass, gnarled mesquite trees, and stubbornly rooted weeds that seemed to mock my new inheritance. It felt isolating, a far cry from the familiar comfort and lived-in warmth of the farmhouse. Every gust of wind carried with it a whisper of my disappointment, a reminder of what I had lost and what Mark had gained. The land felt empty, a vast and indifferent canvas onto which I was expected to build a life. Mark, meanwhile, wasted no time in making the farmhouse his own. I watched him from a distance, a knot of resentment tightening in my stomach as he directed a team of movers. His laughter echoed across the fields, a sound that felt like a deliberate taunt, a celebration of his easy victory. He was already a king in his castle, rearranging furniture and making plans for the future. He'd always had it easier, coasting through life on a wave of Dad's approval and a sense of entitlement that I could never understand. Now, he had the house, the physical embodiment of our family's history and his elevated status within it. All I had was this desolate piece of land and a vague, easily dismissed mention of mineral rights. Out of a mixture of sheer curiosity and a faint, desperate hope, I decided to look into it. I spent the next few weeks making calls, sifting through dusty old county records, and talking to anyone in town who might have some insight into the history of the property. The process was frustrating and slow. Most people just shrugged, recalling Dad's brief and ultimately unsuccessful foray into oil speculation decades ago, a venture that had ultimately gone nowhere and cost him a small fortune. They painted a picture of a failed dream, and I was beginning to feel like I was chasing a ghost. But then, in the quiet and forgotten archives of the county clerk's office, I stumbled upon a brittle, faded geological survey map from the 1980s. It was tucked away in a file, almost an accidental discovery. My heart skipped a beat as I looked at the map, its intricate lines and notations holding a hidden story. There, marked in faded ink, were indications of a significant deposit of a rare earth mineral beneath my seemingly worthless pasture. The faded ink seemed to hum with a secret, a quiet promise of a future I had never dared to imagine. The revelation hit me like a bolt of lightning, a sudden and powerful jolt of pure disbelief and overwhelming excitement. My 80 acres weren't just pasture. They were sitting on a potential fortune, a vast and untapped wealth hidden just beneath the surface. It was a secret Dad had held onto, a quiet ambition he had never been able to realize in his lifetime. The thought of it was dizzying. A wave of disbelief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just a win, it was a cosmic joke at Mark's expense, a twist of fate that was so perfect it felt scripted. I kept the discovery to myself, not wanting to alert Mark or anyone else just yet. The last thing I needed was for him to get wind of it and start his inevitable machinations. I needed to understand the full implications, the logistics of extraction, and the potential market value before I made a move. This was my trump card, and I was going to play it at my own pace. I decided to hire a local geologist, a no-nonsense woman named Sarah, who had a reputation for being thorough and discreet. She was initially skeptical, having heard countless tales of buried treasure that never materialized, her face a mask of polite doubt. But the core samples from our initial exploratory drilling came back positive, confirming the presence of a substantial and commercially viable deposit of the mineral. I watched as Sarah's eyes widened, her usual stoicism replaced by a hint of genuine awe as she reviewed the data. She meticulously checked and rechecked the results, her brow furrowed in concentration. When she finally looked up, she said with a low, reverent voice, "This is significant, potentially life-changing." Her words weren't a promise of wealth, they were a sober statement of fact, and they filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The wheels started turning in my mind, fueled by the rush of possibility. This wasn't just about money. It was about fairness, about finally having something that Mark hadn't simply been handed. It was about proving to myself and to everyone who had ever doubted me that I wasn't just the younger brother, the one who got the leftovers. The thought of his smug face when he learned he had dismissed a fortune for a well-maintained farmhouse spurred me on, giving me a newfound energy and determination. It was time for my quiet victory to begin. Keeping the secret from Mark was becoming an increasingly difficult and stressful exercise in restraint. He'd stop by occasionally, ostensibly to check on the old fences or to offer some patronizing advice about my hobby farm, but I knew he was really just curious about what I was doing with the useless land. His visits were thinly veiled attempts to gather information, to size up my progress and find something to criticize. He'd make condescending remarks about the weeds and the lack of a proper crop, oblivious to the real and significant activity happening beneath the surface. Sarah and her team were discreet, their work disguised as routine soil testing, a plausible cover story that kept Mark and the rest of the town at bay for a while. The work was slow and methodical, each positive report a small victory that fueled my anticipation. I started exploring my options, spending late nights on the phone with lawyers and mining experts, trying to understand the complex web of permits and regulations I would have to navigate. The process was daunting, but the potential reward was immense, a beacon of hope that kept me focused. The conversations were filled with jargon, royalties, environmental impact studies, extraction methods, a whole new language I was forced to learn. One afternoon, Mark came by while Sarah's crew was drilling a new exploratory well near the center of the pasture. The loud, rhythmic thump of the drill rig was difficult to ignore. He watched them with a puzzled frown, his initial nonchalance giving way to a look of suspicion. The scene was too professional, too well-equipped to be simple soil testing. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice laced with an edge I hadn't heard before. "That's a real rig, not some old tractor." I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant and unconcerned. "Just seeing if the land's good for anything," I replied vaguely, hoping he'd accept the flimsy explanation and leave. He didn't press further, but I could see the questions swirling in his eyes. The casual dismissal of his property was now a professional operation. His victory was starting to feel less secure. He stood there for a long moment, a hand on his hip, as if trying to absorb the truth of what he was seeing. I knew in that moment that it wouldn't be long before he figured something out, before the puzzle pieces clicked into place. The secret was out, or at least on the verge of being discovered. The quiet part of my plan was over, and the confrontation I had been dreading was now inevitable. Make sure to subscribe now so you don't miss the moment everything changes. The news finally broke, not through me, but through a chance conversation Mark overheard at the local diner, a place where secrets were rarely kept for long. Someone, a well-meaning but talkative acquaintance, was boasting about my potential fortune, mentioning the mineral rights on the old Henderson property, and dropping my name with a conspiratorial air. Mark, never one to let an opportunity for gossip pass him by, pressed for more details, his initial disbelief quickly morphing into cold dread as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The drilling rigs, my vague answers, the lawyers, it all made a terrible kind of sense. He confronted me later that day, driving his truck across the pasture in a cloud of dust. He slammed the door shut, his face a mask of disbelief and incandescent anger. "You knew," he roared, his voice echoing across the open fields. "You knew all along and you didn't say anything?" His accusations came in a torrent, a furious and chaotic stream of hurt and betrayal. I stood my ground, the years of being overshadowed and dismissed, hardening my resolve. I felt no guilt, only a quiet, righteous anger of my own. "Why would I?" I retorted, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "You got the house, didn't you? The valuable property, the one everyone assumed was the real prize." I pointed towards the farmhouse in the distance, a silent testament to his victory. My words hit him like a physical blow. His anger intensified, transforming from a general fury into a focused personal attack. He accused me of being deceitful, of deliberately hiding this from him, of betraying our family. But I saw the real emotion beneath the fury, a consuming, bitter envy. He couldn't stand the thought that I, the younger brother, the one who had always lived in his shadow, had stumbled upon something of such immense value. He saw it as a personal affront, a cosmic injustice that had stolen his thunder and his sense of superiority. He had taken the family's most visible asset, while I had been left with the hidden fortune. The dynamic of our relationship, which had been set in stone for a lifetime, was now violently and irrevocably shattered. The revelation of the mineral rights sent a shockwave through our already fragile family dynamic. The subtle power imbalance that had always existed between Mark and me was gone, replaced by a palpable, bitter tension that made every interaction an exercise in walking on eggshells. He started making demands, his sense of entitlement growing with each passing day. He insisted with a straight face that the mineral rights were a family asset, a part of our shared legacy, and that he was entitled to a share. His logic was twisted and self-serving, a desperate attempt to reclaim the victory he now realized he had squandered. Carol, ever the pragmatist, echoed his sentiments, her tone surprisingly reasonable on the surface, though I could see the calculation and avarice in her eyes. She spoke of fairness, of family unity, and of Dad's likely intentions, all while her face betrayed a cold, hard desire for a piece of the pie. She was Mark's enabler, the voice of reason that masked his greed. I refused, my stance unwavering. Dad's will was crystal clear. The pasture and whatever lay beneath it was mine and mine alone. I had no intention of ceding a single dollar to the man who had mocked my inheritance. The arguments became frequent and heated, a series of phone calls and tense meetings filled with accusations and resentments that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Every conversation was a painful excavation of old wounds and long-held grievances. Our relationship, never particularly close, was fracturing beyond repair. The foundation of trust and respect had crumbled under the weight of greed. Even Mom, caught in the middle, got involved, calling me repeatedly and urging me to be fair to my brother. She pleaded with me to think of the family, to consider the optics of my good fortune, but I felt a sense of righteous indignation. Where was this concern for fairness, for family unity, When Mark inherited the house, the more obviously valuable asset at the time, where was the plea for him to share the spoils? The double standard was galling, and it solidified my resolve. I was not going to be bullied into giving away what was rightfully mine. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about standing up for myself and defending the choice my father had made, however unintentionally brilliant it turned out to be. Despite the escalating family drama and the relentless pressure from Mark and Carol, the process of securing the mining permits moved forward with a quiet, unyielding momentum. Sarah and her team were a pillar of strength, their professionalism a stark contrast to the emotional chaos swirling around me. They navigated the complex bureaucratic hurdles with expertise and determination, their focus on the scientific and logistical details a welcome distraction from the personal attacks. The geological surveys continued to yield promising results, each new report confirming and then exceeding our initial expectations. The potential value of the mineral deposit was even greater than we had first estimated, a fortune that seemed to grow with every core sample. I started making plans, my imagination running wild with the possibilities. I envisioned a future free from the constant shadow of financial worry, a future where I could finally pursue my own dreams, perhaps investing in sustainable energy or helping to rebuild our small, struggling town. This wasn't just about personal wealth. It was about the power to create a new legacy, to do good with the hand I had been dealt. The prospect filled me with a sense of purpose I had never known before. Mark, meanwhile, became increasingly desperate as he realized the full extent of his miscalculation. He hired a lawyer, a slick and aggressive litigator from the city, and began to threaten legal action. The lawyer sent me a sternly worded letter, full of legal jargon and thinly veiled accusations, demanding that I enter into negotiations. It was an intimidating document, designed to scare me into submission. But I refused to be swayed. I knew the will was clear and legally binding, and I had a team of my own legal counsel who reassured me that Mark's case was weak at best. This was my chance, my opportunity to build a life on my own terms, to finally step out of Mark's shadow and forge my own path. The fight was difficult and emotionally draining, but I was determined to see it through. My resolve had been forged in the fire of years of feeling second best, and I wasn't about to give up on the greatest opportunity of my life for the sake of a brother who only wanted what was mine. Don't forget to subscribe now for more updates on this unfolding family conflict and the fate of the hidden fortune. The legal battle with Mark dragged on, a constant source of stress and anxiety that felt like a low-grade fever. His lawyer, a sharp-tongued man who clearly relished the drama, argued in court that Dad hadn't fully understood the potential value of the mineral rights when he drafted the will. He painted a picture of an old man making an accidental bequest, implying that there had been a mistake, a clerical error of epic proportions. It was a weak and speculative argument, but it cast a shadow of doubt over everything, forcing me to defend the integrity of my father's final wishes. The cost of legal representation was mounting, and there were moments of despair when I doubted my ability to see this through, when the pressure felt overwhelming. But the unwavering support of Sarah and my legal team kept me going. They reminded me that I was in the right, that Dad's intentions, however unknowingly prescient, were clear in the legal document. They were a bulwark against Mark's relentless attacks, a steady voice of reason in the storm. The tension within the family became unbearable. Holiday gatherings were cancelled and phone calls were strained and infrequent, punctuated by long, awkward silences. It was a heavy price to pay for my inheritance, the slow and painful dissolution of my family, but I couldn't back down. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about principle, about standing up for myself against a lifetime of being overlooked and dismissed. The courtroom became a theater for our private family drama, with the judge as the reluctant audience. Mark, his face a mask of self-pity and entitlement, spoke of our shared history, of the years he had worked on the farm, as if that entitled him to a portion of the mineral rights. He twisted memories and manipulated facts to suit his narrative, painting me as a greedy opportunist who had taken advantage of a loophole in our father's will. I sat there, listening to the distortions of my life, my own voice a quiet counterpoint to his loud accusations. As the weeks turned into months, I began to realize that the fortune I had stumbled upon wasn't just a gift. It was a test. It was a trial by fire that was forcing me to confront my past, to define my future, and to finally stand on my own 2 feet. The emotional toll was immense, but with each passing day my resolve grew stronger. The courtroom was no longer just a place of legal proceedings. It was a crucible, and I was being forged in the heat of a conflict that was far more personal than any lawyer could ever understand. After months of legal wrangling, of testimony and depositions and countless hours of waiting, the judge finally delivered the verdict. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of nervous energy. The judge's voice was calm and deliberate as he read his decision, a voice of authority that cut through the tension. He ruled in my favor, stating that the mineral rights belonged to me, as stipulated unequivocally in Dad's will. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so powerful and overwhelming it almost brought me to my knees. It was over. I had won. The legal fight had been long and draining, but in the end, the truth of the document had prevailed. Mark was furious, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief as the verdict was read. He slammed his fist on the table, a sound that echoed throughout the courtroom, and then stormed out, Carol trailing silently behind him. His dreams of a sudden fortune, of a comfortable and easy life, had been completely shattered by a piece of paper. I knew in that moment that this legal victory would come at a high personal cost. It wasn't the end of our conflict, but for now I had secured my future and validated the path I had chosen. The mining operation began shortly thereafter, a flurry of activity that transformed the once quiet pasture into a bustling hub of industry. The rhythmic hum of machinery became the new soundtrack to my life, a constant reminder of the fortune that lay beneath the surface. It was a stark contrast to the quiet, agricultural life I had known, a visible testament to the seismic shift in my fortunes. I used a portion of the initial profits to invest wisely, working with financial advisors to ensure long-term security, a future that was no longer built on the precarious foundation of hope, but on the solid ground of my own success. The operation also brought a new sense of purpose to my life. I wasn't just a benefactor of good luck. I was an employer, a creator of opportunities for the people in our small town. The quiet, rural landscape was changing, and I was at the forefront of that change. I looked out at the land, no longer seeing a desolate pasture, but a field of possibility, a living, breathing testament to the power of a single, forgotten clause in a will. The victory was sweet, but it was also a heavy responsibility, a new life I was now tasked with building. Years have passed since the reading of the will, and the echoes of that tense day have finally begun to fade, replaced by the humming of machinery and the quiet satisfaction of a life well built. The pasture is no longer just a field of dry grass. It's a thriving operation, a testament to the unexpected path my life has taken. It has not only secured my financial future, but has also brought much-needed jobs and economic growth to the local community, a responsibility I've embraced with a sense of pride and duty. The land, once a symbol of my meager inheritance, is now a symbol of prosperity and opportunity. Mark and I remain estranged, the bitterness of the legal battle and the resentment over my success having created a permanent, unbridgeable rift between us. The occasional phone call from Mum is a painful reminder of the family that no longer exists, of the memories that are now tainted by conflict and greed. She still hopes for a reconciliation, but the wounds are too deep, the betrayal too profound. The chasm between us is filled with all the things we never said and all the things we can never take back. Looking back, I realize that Dad's seemingly random division of property ultimately revealed a hidden truth about all of us. He saw something in Mark, a need for the familiar, the tangible, and something in me, a need for a blank slate, an opportunity to build my own legacy. The house held memories and comfort, a place to rest on past achievements, but the pasture held opportunity, a field of possibility that forced me to work, to fight and to grow. It was a test of my character, and I believe I passed. The journey taught me the value of perseverance, the importance of knowing your worth, and the profound truth that sometimes what seems like a loss can actually be the greatest gain. The fortune wasn't just a gift, it was a catalyst, a force that pushed me to become the person I was always meant to be. I look at the land now, not with a sense of ownership, but with a sense of deep gratitude. It was a quiet inheritance that made a loud, lasting impact. Thank you for watching this story unfold. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel for more compelling narratives.